Welcome back to another episode of Catholic Conversations. I'm your host, Joelle Zarnowski, back in the host chair this week. Last week we switched things up a little bit, and today we have Beth Hoey, our director of the Foundation Office here at the Diocese, joining us for our episode. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so people probably think that I have you here to talk about Hope Appeal, because when they think about the Foundation Office, that's the first thing that comes to mind is Hope Appeal. But we're actually here to talk about another facet of your position here with us, which is stewardship. And so a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? A misunderstanding, if you will, about what stewardship actually entails. A lot of people think that that just has to do with financial giving, but that is not the case. So could you explain for our listeners really what stewardship is, what it encompasses, and the 4 pillars? Kind of break those down for us.
Sure. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. When someone says the word stewardship, usually people think of 2 things. They're about to ask me for money, or they're about to ask me to volunteer for some committee, at the parish, which is part of it. That's a piece of stewardship, but it doesn't really speak to what stewardship is about, which is what we are called to do as Catholics. And one of the frameworks for stewardship, which I try to work with parishes, so that parishes can be intentional and really try to create a culture of stewardship, is the 4-pillar model, which is it has service, which is time, talent, and treasure, and giving those things, which is what we think of first. But it also has hospitality. And when you think of the pillars of stewardship, it's really on a personal level and on a parish level as well. So for hospitality, what do I do as a Catholic to make people feel comfortable and welcome and part of the Catholic family on an everyday basis when I'm at Mass or other church functions, those within the Catholic community and outside of the Catholic community? On a parish level, it's the old story. If somebody were to walk into church today for the first time or visit for the first time, how do they feel? I would hope they felt like I'm here at a family gathering.
Yeah.
Right? And what can we do intentionally to make sure we're being hospitable?
Yeah.
So there's service, there's hospitality, there's prayer, which that could be a whole podcast on its own.
Yes.
Personally, what am I doing to make sure I'm intentionally putting prayer in the forefront of my daily life, and how am I growing my relationship with Jesus Christ? And on the parish level, how are we providing opportunities and encouraging people individually to grow in prayer, and also providing those things as a parish in groups to come together to pray, right, for others. So there's prayer and then formation. Okay. So formation, most people think of faith formation with our kids and going through, school and having that faith formation, which is part of it. Right. On a personal level, what am I doing to deepen my faith intentionally, right? And putting that at the forefront of my life. And what are we doing as a parish for faith formation? I mean, we have faith formation and catechesis down pretty well, and there's wonderful things being done really to help parents as well, continuing that faith at home. But what am I doing, and what can I contribute at a parish level in small groups, one-on-one and individually, and on small groups to really foster formation?
Okay, great, great. So what does stewardship truly mean in the Catholic faith, and why is it so important? You said that as Catholics we're called to be, to participate in stewardship, to be stewards. So what does that mean?
Well, first of all, we could look at the definition of steward, which means we're entrusted with something valuable that's not ours, right? That's what being a steward means. And I think of it in stewardship is not something we do. Stewardship is how we live, right? It's how we live our lives. So, and the USCCB in their pastoral letter on stewardship, which I think came out before you were born, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. We might have to do some research on that one.
But it's still very true, and, I encourage people to look at that. But the very first sentence of the preface of the whole letter is, once you decide to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, stewardship is not an option.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah. And I think of it in 3 steps. The first of which is that everything comes from God. Once again, I I'm not perfect, and this is how I challenge myself as an individual. All gifts come from God, and to be intentional and to think about that every day, right? And it's beautiful. When people say, "Oh, you work in stewardship," I'm like, "Yeah, how blessed am I? How inspiring, humbling, how joyful every day is for me in that, because it reminds us that we are each valued." That you and you have your own gifts from God. You are a unique creation with all of these gifts with a purpose for them.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. So that's the first step, realizing that everything comes from God. Everything we have, comes from God. The second piece of it is to be grateful for it. Right. To realize life is rough. Life is challenging. We talk about it all the time. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of pressures on all of us. But when we stop, especially when we're in a negative place or if we're really struggling or suffering, to really focus on gratitude and what we can be grateful for.
Right.
Wow. Right.
Yeah.
And that's part of stewardship. Not only realizing you have it, but be grateful for it and be grateful for that in others as well. And to recognize that in others and for people to know that there is gratitude in that. And then the third piece of it is use all those gifts to serve others.
Right.
Not to keep for ourselves. We're just stewards of those gifts,
Right.
right? So they're meant to be used to serve others, to go out and do that.
Yeah.
Time, talent, and treasure. And the big challenge is to do it intentionally, not to do it with the extra time we have or the extra money we might think we have, if we're talking about time and treasure, but to sacrificially do it and think of it first with what I have, how can I use that to serve others?
Right.
It's a challenge.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, but I think one that people would find very rewarding. I know for me, I just finished school last spring, and so I was going to school full time, working 2 almost full time jobs, and so very, very busy. And so when I graduated, there was this thought of like, oh, I'm gonna have all this free time to myself. And what did I do? I turned around and I filled all of that time volunteering for other things that because it was like, well, yeah, I have this free time and I can sit at home and spend it by myself, but I have things that I can give to other people, and I want to do that. I want to spend the time that I have. And are there days that I'm like, oh, I really don't want to go do this right now. I'm so tired. I would rather just sit at home on the couch with my dog and watch like brainless TV. Certainly. But, I go and I give my time and I never regret it. You never regret giving that time or giving of yourself because you know that you are sharing your gifts with other people. You're doing something for somebody else that it really could make a huge difference in their day or in their life. And why hold that in? Why keep that to yourself?
And the gift that you are giving and the way that you are giving it cannot be done by anybody else.
Right. Yeah. It's such a beautiful experience, even though sometimes, yes, absolutely. It is.
Oh, it's not easy all the time.
Huge sacrifice.
No.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, so how does stewardship contribute to the overall mission and vitality of the church at both the parish and the diocesan level?
It's who we are and what we're called to do, right? So I think the strength of a parish is really its culture. And if there can be a culture of stewardship, everybody says when I tell somebody I work, for the church, they're like, oh, I hope there's a church for my grandchildren and my great grandchildren and what's going on today, and I love when somebody mentions that because then I get to share the beautiful things that I see every day. But it really comes from being intentional. I've probably said that word too many times already.
But it's important.
But that's what I like to work with parishes too, because some of those things I mentioned, like the hospitality and the prayer, and they're oh yeah, we kind of do that. We do that in separate ways. But if it's in an intentional way to make that part of the culture. So from a parish perspective and a diocesan perspective, it's not, okay, what do we need? This is what we're called to do. What do we need to do that? It's no, the focus is on every individual. The focus is on getting to know those individuals, to build relationships, to find out what gifts that you have and provide the opportunity for you to use those gifts to touch other lives. That helps you in your faith, that helps that other person, and that connects the whole, church as a whole, the whole parish as a whole. In the diocese, I think there's a lot of things that are happening, with stewardship. If you look around, and I encourage people to do that, I'm grateful for you and your gifts of communication.
Thank you.
And it doesn't take, you don't have to look far to see the impact of stewardship, on social media, follow the Syracuse Diocese pages, but also follow the parishes. I follow all the parish pages. And every day there's another story where you're touched, you're inspired, you're humbled, and I think that's the impact. Diocesan-wide, it comes down to how we serve every single person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's so great. So you said that you work with parishes, and I know that you've worked with a couple of the parishes that I work at that have stewardship committees. So what are some examples of stewardship initiatives that are happening in parishes across the diocese that you can share?
Sure. Once again, they're everywhere.
Right.
And what I'm really focusing on now is intentional to make sure we're not missing anything and we're there for everybody. But stewardship is seen in everything that a parish does. And what I encourage people to do, to think about, is when you see, from the youngest of our people, I mentioned faith formation. That stewardship is the volunteer who's coming to that class, to be there, one-on-one with that child. But it's also like what's happening in catechesis right now with that building faith at home. The understanding that so much of faith happens at home with parent and child, or guardian and child, loved one and child, and providing those resources to say, here's how to do it. Let us help you make that happen. So I think of moments like that. I think of like a mom at a table at night talking to her kid and about Jesus and about how we're helping each other, from that to the moments like delivering communion and serving communion, that sacred moment that person cannot have if it weren't for that other person saying, I'm going to make the time, like you said, right? What do I have time to do? No, I'm going to make the time, and this is a gift I have, to share that with another person. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Hope Appeal, because, I do coordinate it, and treasure is also important in all of this. That could be a whole nother podcast.
Right.
Everybody has problems with money and talking about money, but at the end of the day, Jesus talked about money all the time. So if he did it, we can do it.
Right.
And it's part of that sacrificial giving. This necklace I have on, my husband gave me for Christmas, and in it is an ancient coin from the Holy Land, which is the value of the widow's mite, of that story.
Yeah.
It was a little bit that she gave. For her, it's sacrificial.
Right.
So I think if we all can understand that too, and look inside ourselves, right, and what we can do sacrificially in time and in treasure, when we all do that piece, it comes together.
Right.
Yeah. So I love what we're doing on social media as well. How can we pray for you today? And you gathering that group of us that I'm a part of, which I'm so excited about, of employees right here in the Chancery downtown that are praying for all those attentions that come in, because they matter. Yeah. Like you feel that.
Oh, absolutely.
I just, had a struggle at home, and my son has been really critically ill. I felt prayer. Like I knew people were praying for me, and that's what got us through. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's stewardship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's such it seems small. It seems like such a small thing. Like, oh yeah, it takes nothing for me to pray for somebody, but you don't know the impact that you have. And we've received from that prayer intention group that we have, we've received emails from people that have told us that, their prayers were answered. And so it just goes to speak to the power of prayer, and that something that seems like, oh, well, I pray every day, or, I pray every time I go to mass, it's not that big of a deal. It is. It's such a big deal. And it is something that, with stewardship, it doesn't have to be something like so large scale. It can be something very small that you do, but it's still so impactful. I know we have a group at one of the churches that I work at, the they do like knitting. They knit blankets for people that are they're homebound or they're sick or they're in the hospital or nursing home, whatever. And they haven't been able to meet the last 2 months because of the weather. You know, the weather's been bad. They haven't been able to get out and have their group meeting, but they're still sitting at home knitting these beautiful, beautiful blankets. And so we just shared a post this weekend on our social media that had all the blankets that they had made, and just knowing that it touches people's lives. And this is something that I certainly do not have the skill to knit. I don't have the patience for it.
Nor I.
But these women do. They do. So before we wrap up, how can individuals and families incorporate the principles of stewardship into their daily lives, and what encouragement or advice would you give them to take that first step?
Personally, I think wake up every day and realize the wonderful creation you are.
That's great
you
advice.
are so that's
Really
how I
good
try to
advice.
start my day.
Yeah.
I have all these gifts, you know, that I did not deserve, that were just given to me just because God loves me, you know, and you are here for a reason.
Yeah.
You have that special makeup of all of those gifts, and there's a purpose for you. And just like you said, in very little ways. And often the things I witness of people giving so freely are for people they will never, ever meet.
Right.
Ever. You know, but know in your heart that that does make a difference, you know. And like I said, today's world is very, very difficult. You know, but we're called to action. It's not something passive. It's when I have time, or, you know, if I have a few extra dollars, it's like, what can I do today? I'm here for a reason. How can I put others first?
Right.
And once you put others first, I mean, life is glorious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard of a person complain, oh, I did this, or in service to another person, and boy, I wish I didn't do that. I mean,
Right.
and that's what we're all called to do. So I think it's the very little things, but I think it begins with you understanding that you are valuable and that you are special and that you have something to offer in big ways and in very, very small ways that will change people's lives forever. And on the parish level, be grateful for those people who always stand up, and every time they say something needs to be done,
Right.
they stand up. But say first, here's what's happening in my parish, or throughout the diocese and some of the programs. What do I have that I could really bring? You know, and on the parish side, I would encourage parish leaders to change their perception from here's what we need to do, here's what we need.
Right.
Here's the money we need, and here's the resources and people we need. And change from that perspective to service to others. Here's all these individuals in our parish, you know, in those relationships, and we get to learn the gifts that they have. Now, how can we facilitate that gift
Right.
to do the work and be the face and hands of Christ?
Yeah.
And if you do that, it all comes together and it all works out.
Right.
You know, and once again, that's a perception of thinking of others
Right.
before self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah. Neat stuff.
Yeah.
All day long I get to
right.
watch this stuff. It's
I
really,
know.
it's great. I'm
I
very, very
know.
blessed.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for being here and talking to us about this. And, anybody who's interested in getting more involved and reflecting on their gifts, certainly look at your parishes, see what they're already doing, see if there's something that you think you can offer them that maybe they don't already have. And then, we are going to have more resources for stewardship on the diocesan website in the coming months while we're working on really building that. So
Yeah, stay tuned.
yes, definitely stay tuned. And thank you for being here. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And we will see you next week.
Thanks.